Boa tarde a todos e todas que estão
Good afternoon to all who are following us here today, this fourth edition of the Triple Helix.
gostaria de dar continuidade com a nossa
I would like to continue with our roundtable on changes and assessment of economic activity in Brazil and its impact on society, perspectives and challenges. We have here with us two speakers with ample experience, not only in assessment, in innovation, but also. The first is Edgar Mamiya, full professor of the University of Brasília and current coordinator of Engineering 3 at CAPES. He is graduated in Mechanical Engineering in PUC and also a doctor in Mechanical Engineering by PUC, Rio de Janeiro. His postdoctorate work was on applied mechanics in Stanford, and he has contributed together with CAPES in assessment of post-graduation since 2019 in Engineering 3 and other disciplines, and coordinator since 2014 to March 2018, and since April 2018, coordinator of engineering in CAPES. The title of his is Transition of Evaluation of Assessment in Programs in Engineering for a Multidisciplinary Approach. Our second speaker is Plonski, a full professor at the University of São Paulo and a representative of the Graduate Evaluation Change Chair in CAPES, also a chemical engineer from USP and with a master's degree through, sorry, it wasn't possible to get that. He was also had a Fulbright scholarship in Polytechnical Institute of the United States and the director of management of the and a member of the Science Academy of São Paulo State, coordinating. You have said it in English. And also a member of the Technical Institute of Israel. The title of his talk is Post-Graduation in Current Times of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And at the end of the presentations, we'll have a question and answer. We have 30 minutes for each speaker, and then we'll have some time for debate. So I will first pass the floor to Edgar Mamiya, Professor. Thank you. I'll start by thanking you for this invitation and the opportunity to discuss the assessment of postgraduate programs and its impact on society. This is an important moment in which we may justify the role of the university in a society that does not yet fully appreciate the aspects and the fundamental role of university in producing knowledge for the solution of issues in society. I will now share my screen. Just a second. I hope you will be able to see this. Yep. Yes. So transitioning the evaluation of the Brazilian postgraduate engineering programs, and I will speak specifically about postgraduate programs in engineering and this transition to a multidimensional approach. Sorry. We'll start with a few remarks on the history of science in Brazil. It's very recent. The Brazilian Academy of Science was launched in 1916. So the first university in Rio de Janeiro was the University of Rio de Janeiro, that is now the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and this occurred in 1920. The USP, University of São Paulo, was created in 1934. The Business Society for the Development of Science was organized in 1949. So the Brazilian Society for the Progress of Science was founded. The CNPq, National Council for Scientific and Technological Development, was created in 1951. That's very recent. So this is the most traditional agency to, funding research, supporting research in Brazil. And in 1952, CAPES was created, the Coordination of the Improvement of Higher Educational Personnel, which was currently responsible for the assessment process of postgraduate programs. Brazil is ranked in a very comfortable position, actually, internationally. According to WS, from 2011 to 2016, we ranked in 13th place in publication of papers in this this ranking of the most productive universities from the point of view of knowledge and generation. But there's another aspect that we should consider, which is the impact of science, of the knowledge that we are generating. In the same period, the impact of our science has been below, meta levels below all the average, but the good news is that the diagnosis of the Clarivate analysis of CAPES indicated that we would achieve the world average, would reach world average this year in 2021. But we also have to take into consideration that the Academy has produced a very low level of cooperation with the industrial sector. So only 1% from 2011 to 2016 had the cooperation of partners from industry, from the industrial sector. This table shows, this chart shows the 20 main collaboration with international corporations in our academy. So the main partner, the leading partner here is Petrobras. But in a 6-year period, we had only 190 papers or initiatives, cooperation in collaborative initiatives that produce papers. So most of the collaborations have occurred in the pharmaceutical sector. So that means that there's a lot to invest still in this aspect of collaboration with the industrial sector. An aspect that is very unique to Brazil science research in Brazil is that most Brazilian research has been produced in the universities within the environment of postgraduate courses. So when we talk about postgraduate courses, we are also talking about the production of science and vice versa. The number of postgraduate programs grew from 38 in 1965 to over 4,500 in 2019, and this number is still growing. A greater part, an important part of these programs are concentrated in the south and southeastern regions. So 2/3 of the programs are installed in these two regions, and practically half the postgraduate programs are concentrated in the southeastern region. The same panorama is repeated when we consider the postgraduate students that are around nearly 400,000 students today, which is a low number considering the needs of the country, in which we have also a concentration also in the south and southeastern regions. And this has an impact on the perspectives of development and the development perspectives in the other regions. Please excuse the translator. CAPS is a federal agency responsible for the approval and creation of postgraduate programs and the accreditation and evaluation of postgraduate programs in Brazil. This process and the recommendation of creation of these programs is organized in 49 knowledge fields, in exact fields in technology, life science, and humanities. The periodical evaluation process started in 1976. Currently, evaluation is performed each 4 years, and the current cycle we are working in is the one from starting 2017 to 2020. Each evaluation receives a note of 1 to 7, and programs graded 3 to 7 are authorized to award postgraduate degrees. Master's and doctor's degrees. Grade 6 and 7 characterize programs with international level standards. As I said, as already mentioned, most within research activities most research activities are developed in the universities. So the evaluation of programs have a key role in improving the quantity and quality of the science produced in the country. So due to these incentives, but through the evaluation of programs, we see that today we have published results in high-ranked journals in the international scene. But now what we need is a new direction, so our evaluation activities. It is imperative at this moment that the post-graduation system in Brazil increases its ability to transfer knowledge to the society, contributing to its well-being and the sustainability of the environment. This is an issue that has been put aside for too long. And we have to focus on the quality and the impact of the outputs, more than just on their quantity. So until recently, a greater volume of scientific production was the goal, and a justifiable goal, considering we do produce very little science. But this issue in some ways has already been well met, and now we have to work on the impact of these results. So we have to focus more on the quality than on quantity now. In this context, CAP is promoting changes in the evaluation methodology, with focus on results more than on processes. And here, this directive falls in the sense of allowing that postgraduate programs may decide what on their processes so that may obtain the results desired in the scope of their proposals. Again, I emphasize strongly that we are prioritizing quality over the quantity of outputs, and we are including transfer of knowledge and impact on society as key items in the evaluation process of postgraduate programs. Multidimensional evaluation, which I suppose we will we'll have more details here. Well, considers 5 dimensions of evaluation: training, the doctor and the master, research, knowledge transfer, social impact, and internationalization. This approach focuses on results. Each of these dimensions represent a result. And we have 5 grades, 1 per dimension, characterizing the level of excellence in each one of these dimensions. So this supplies 5 distinct profiles of excellence for each dimension, and not just an average excellence profile that a single grade furnishes now currently. The form, the process, the evaluation process in the 4-year period of 2017 represents a transition to this multidimensional approach, considering 3 aspects: the program, training, and social impact. I will discuss a little further. We'll go into further detail what is included in each of these evaluations. Just to put this into context, Engineering 3 is one of the areas of evaluation at CAPES, and it's responsible for evaluating the areas of mechanical, industrial, aerospace, ocean, and naval engineering. So what I'm going to say now, this includes some aspects which are very specific to this area of Engineering 3. So we are in this Engineering 3, we will assess the postgraduate programs according to relevance, maturity, and comprehensiveness of research areas and projects. We will evaluate, we'll analyze laboratory facilities, the curriculum structure, and the faculty profile in terms of their current academic outputs. We will also evaluate compliance of these activities to the vision and objectives of the postgraduate program.
We are introducing self-evaluation and strategic planning. And as it is a process, or rather there are elements of assessment, evaluation elements in this transition period, we will limit ourselves not to analyze the content of strategic planning and self-evaluation, but rather we shall evaluate the processes that lead to strategic planning and self-evaluation. In the 4-year period that begins now, this self-evaluation process will include the consistencies between the established targets in the strategic planning and the achievements. And it will also assess the consistency of self-evaluation and the external evaluation performed by CAPES. This is a process that will only happen by the end of this 4-year period, which will be 2024. Training. In training, we focus on the quality of the graduates. To this end, we consider qualitative analysis of 10 selected citations, master's degree, and we shall analyze them in light of their contribution to the state of the art in their respective knowledge fields. And in order to complement this analysis, we shall assess the best publication from each PhD graduate in high-ranked journals for the selected graduates, and this will be evaluated according to the impact of the journal, where the paper was published, and the results. We shall also assess the success of these graduates in their own careers, and this success as perceived according to current evaluation. These graduates will be classified in three groups: those that graduated between 2006 and 2010, 2011, 2015, and 2016 and 2020. Why are we doing this? Because the success characterization of graduates that have recently graduated is quite different from those graduates from 2006-2010 period. In order to be able to compare them, we have to perform separate analysis of these three groups. And another challenge that we face is the analysis of the initiatives to promote a more in-depth, robust training on the fundamentals in the dissertations. With regard to faculty, faculty members will be evaluated in terms of their capacity to fund the research, to support their research activities. And we shall also analyze selected publications regarding the impact of these journals where the papers were published, and we are adopting a research impact metric based on the H index. This indicator that we are adopting here, that we are using at CAPES for quantitative analysis, is the H square index, the number of N of faculty members with at least N citations. So, for instance, in this example, this is a fictitious example, there are 20 members, each one with their own H index, and in this example, we see that H square index is equal to 12 because there are 12 members with at least 12 citations. The 12th one here has 14, and the 13th has 12. So this member here does not have 13. So this H is the one that determines this member with this number of citations. H square index, we prefer to use this one when compared to the average H of the faculty. It can be contaminated by outliers, those at the two extremities. So we believe that H square best represents the research impact characteristic. Well, since I've mentioned impact, third assessment requirement assesses impacts. The academic impact. In this 4-year period, we will use the FWCI indicator, Field Weighted Citation Impact, from SciVal, and represents the ratio of total citations actually received by the faculty members and total citations that would be expected based on the world average of the respective areas of knowledge. So if you have an indicator, FWC1 equal to 1, the output performs just as expected for the global average. If it's -1, he will be cited less than the average, world average. Another impact we shall evaluate are the economic, social, and cultural impacts of the program's activities. So what we do is that the programs will indicate, will point out and select certain technologies developed by faculty and students since 2010 with impact evidence within the 2017-2020 period. And our expectations are that these will point out social impacts such as human development, social inclusion, and the reduction of inequalities, sustainability, wealth generation, access to information, and so forth and so on. Another dimension that is evaluated is internationalization. We shall assess the relevance, the maturity, and comprehensiveness of students and researchers' mobility, not only in the direction toward abroad, but also foreign students and researchers to our programs. We shall also assess levels of collaboration with foreign research teams and the capacity to access international funding. Another aspect is international visibility of the postgraduate program and their faculty. And then we shall also evaluate social insertion in its area of influence in terms of its contribution toward economy and society, in terms of, for instance, production of new technologies and services for society, or the improvement in the quality of human resources trained by the program, and other aspects as well. In closing, I'd like to make some final remarks. The current evaluation process of Brazilian postgraduate programs represent a transition to a multidimensional evaluation that establishes different profiles or multiple profiles of excellence. It emphasizes and privileges the quality of the output over its quantity. It evaluates the results rather than the processes. So they have to organize the processes to obtain the best result. It also focuses on the quality of the resulting PhD or master's graduate more than on the academic reputation of the faculty members. And the academic, economic, social, and cultural impacts become key aspects of this evaluation process. This new methodology, it is strongly qualitative in nature, and this presents and poses huge challenges to us. But these challenges have to be faced, and this qualitative assessment is of the essence, so we can achieve higher impact levels for our research output and also reduce the gap between the Brazilian academia and the society. With this, I'd like to close my participation, and I give the floor back to Professor Evelyn. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mamiya, for your very clear and didactic presentation. I'm sure that we shall have time to talk more about it. And now I'd like to call Professor Ari Plonski, post-graduation and points of innovative entrepreneurship. I shall also share my screen. Give me a minute, please. Here it is. Very well. Good afternoon. I'd like to greet Professor Evelyn, our moderator, coordinator of this session. I'd like to also thank Professors Marisa and Branca, two of the organizers of this fourth Entrepreneurial University Metrics Initiative, and also greet Professor Edgar. Mamiya, as was said, was very clear, straight to the point, and at the same time profound, in the sense that it was able to harness the main aspects of this transition. And in this sense, we agree fully. Quite the contrary, Professor. Professor Edgar showed us in a very practical way the application, the precise application of this conceptual transition of the greatest importance that is underway. I have to make a disclaimer. I believe that Professor Marisa is from production engineering. He invited Professor Edgar, that I'm also professor and production engineer and administration at the University of São Paulo. So, in a way, our perspectives are, if I may say so, have a greater emphasis. I don't know whether there are people who are different in our evaluation committee if we would have the same affinity, but I can only applaud Professor Edgar's presentation. Likewise, the slides are basically in English, just one or other in Portuguese, but I shall speak in Portuguese, and I'd like to thank the translators, the interpreters, who have an incredible job. I always admire them, and I'm in awe when I hear them interpreting into another language. Very well. Our journey, very short journey, will touch on four themes. First of all, research universities in the time of entrepreneurship, a resounding times in the era of cholera, and in the post-graduation book, the assessment or appreciation, evaluation of innovation in Brazilian, according to the plan that ended almost 2 months ago, and another proposal to improve evaluation of post-graduation courses in Brazil that was presented wonderfully by Professor Edgar. So I'm just going to touch very briefly on this and then make a few additional comments to what he said. And so, research in the time of entrepreneurship, with many names and many articles and seminars, expectations, discussions, reflections, frustrations, in short, whatever. If we should summarize what is expected from research universities in this time, which I'm calling time of entrepreneurship, is essentially what we see in this drawing here, this figure. How can the knowledge that is within the minds, the heads of these people in the university, post-graduation courses, undergraduate students, faculty, administrative staff, how is all this knowledge and with the resources they have at hand? I remember that in São Paulo, for instance, the three Paulista universities, USP, Unicamp, and Unesp, get 9.57% of the state's tax, namely from the ICMS taxes, which is a volume. When we mention this with colleagues from abroad, they ask us, but that's almost 10%. Is that what, did I get this right? And so there is not only enormous expectation, but there are resources. So it's quite normal that the universities and society, we are part of the society, it's natural that there is a certain expectation. If I should have to summarize this graphically, this is what is expected, that all this can bear fruit of different nature, different colors, pointing in different directions. I think this is the main message of this first topic. In terms, in a more operational light, if I could describe some recent changes, changes that occurred throughout this century. We've already advanced into a fifth of this century. I'd say that the university's perspective or expectations, the model of what we call technology transferred, changed from the classical version of technology transfer, which would be a better name, to models that are more balanced on the one hand, but more sophisticated on the other hand, and models that are within the concept of open innovation, models of corporate venturing, where we see academic spin-offs coming together with large companies, and the university is part of this.
We have to see, for example, some of the vaccines that are being offered, such as Pfizer vaccine.
Essa combinação, né? Quer dizer, vocês têm participação acadêmica, certamente por trás. Tudo começa com a professora.
Certainly have some participation by academic and by universities.
Vai para a Universidade da Pensilvânia.
We see
uma nova forma de criar vacinas.
The University of Pennsylvania trying new ways to create vaccines, and applying with dozens of different applications for new ways of producing vaccines, and is nearly fired by the University of Pennsylvania. And we see the specific need, because this is a person with modest income, and she needs she can only pay for her daughter's course at the University of Pennsylvania, as long as she is a teacher at the university. So she accepts being demoted in her insertion inside the university, and ends up earning less, but at least she doesn't have to pay that huge amount of money that American families are used to paying for a higher education. So this starts at the university and goes through a startup, so to say, a company, in this case a German company, formed by two Turkish immigrants, and is materialized by the capacity that the huge multinational companies such as Pfizer brings in, and thus the vaccine becomes a world product, including challenging governments in relation to certain clauses, and only big companies, something that only a company as big as Pfizer can do. So the transfer of technology has become a much more sophisticated game, if you wish. Certainly, the spin-offs, startups that are born in universities are not a new phenomenon. We've had this since, I had mentions of this, for example, Hewlett Packard and others that started from garages. So we see that this movement has started, has some history already, but these were just, we're talking about one or another case. We can count them on the fingers of one hand. Now we have a real startup tsunami happening. We are being bombed by startups from every corner. Unicorns have a special place in this pantheon. And we have the X-Techs, Agitech, FinTech, GovTech. This is a cheeseburger of X-Techs. I say this jokingly, but Marisa and Becca know that I have a special connection with these kind of companies when they were still strange to society, so to say, were considered something exotic, of not so much, not so important. So I am very happy that now this exotic dish is being offered as X-Techs. And we also have this very interesting phenomenon that is the social entrepreneurship, that is a combination of second and third sectors. Second sector is business, but is also has also a social aspect. And how do you combine this? The third example I would like to bring on of these transformations is the change that what we call here in Brazil as university extension. This means, extension means we know, we have the knowledge, and we will take this knowledge to those who for some reason have not had the opportunity of this privilege to enjoy this privilege. Of course, I'm being a little bit simple in my description, but when talking about extension, this program, there's a much more sophisticated perception of the university as having a key role in regional development and social development. Something that's mentioned as the third mission of the university. Sometimes very criticized this idea, but that it would be not a lesser mission, but still it is a very important mission. We have a great demand for this, and this tree that I have just described, it is formed in many ways that are evolving, constantly evolving. An expression I like is mission-oriented, universities that are mission-oriented. So I bring an example of Technion, which I am privileged to be involved in a very small manner with him, but that defines itself as a mission-oriented university. It conducts research, it teaches, and does everything you can think of. But the ethos of this university is we have a mission. And I have two concrete examples here. It's defined in the Technion Nation book, which is kind of joking with MIT. It's because Technion considers itself a kind of MIT of the Middle East. So two moments, crucial moments for the survival of the state of Israel came when the authorities identified that for their survival, for their defense in a hostile region, they needed an air force. So Technion responded, yes. So they started a faculty of aeronautic engineering, nowadays called aerospatial engineering. This was a response to a demand. Unfortunately, I don't have the image here of Ben Gurion in a house in the center of Haifa that was beginning to expand. The seat had been created just a few years before and was just exiting from a recession, a huge recession, and they had a new campus was built, and Ben Gurion, the prime minister, was there to launch this new campus, and he said the first faculty built here will be an aeronautic engineering faculty, and it will be built here. So nowadays we know how important the aerospatial industry in Israel is important, and that started there. A second critical moment that I like to remember is after the Six-Day War, in which Charles de Gaulle was the president of France at the time. He didn't like some of the things that resulted at that time, so he declared an embargo, an arms embargo, affecting the aerial fleet that was basically made up of Mirages. So Israel responded by creating the Microelectronic Institute, which afterward had, of course, evolved into computers and computing and so on. And so Israel became an entrepreneur nation, a startup nation. So there are several metaphoric models to demonstrate the university in these times of entrepreneurship. Models like triple helix and models based on startups, and that shows this triple helix model being one of actually the basis for GM. So we have many things to think about, but it's basically that image I showed you before. Well, looking here at Brazil, yes, we love unicorns here. So the role of universities is very important for unicorns. The first Brazilian unicorn, 99, came from a course that was a neighbor to the course where Professor Edgar graduated. I think he said was in the mechanical engineering course, and these guys come from the mechatronic course right next door. Of the 12 unicorns that have appeared, the greater part were generated by youngsters coming from the universities. So here we see on the right Christian Junqueira. He's one of the creators of Nubank. So we're surfing this wave of the unicorns. And something I would like to really draw your attention to is that graduate students, undergraduate students, through junior companies and other student bodies, have understood that it is essential first to understand what is the entrepreneurial university and which are the more entrepreneurial universities in Brazil, and how to make these universities be even more entrepreneurial.
essa moçada,
So,
alunos de graduação, né,
some years, for some years, these undergraduate students have created this ranking of entrepreneurial universities, published already in 3 editions. They elaborate a questionnaire for over 11,000 students in Brazil, asking them what they considered was an entrepreneurial university. And as the ambassadors in these universities collected data and generated a ranking of entrepreneurial universities. So Professor Henry, that you can see on the photo there, participated in the launching of the publishing of the first edition, the launching of the first edition. So the first topic, research in times of entrepreneurship. The second topic, expectations and prospects for entrepreneurship in graduate studies. So I have here a slide that shows a set of schools in the United States with a question: why a degree? Why earn a degree in entrepreneurship? Well, on one side, we have entrepreneurship as being an object of study, of postgraduate study, research, and we have many postgraduate titles in the States, including the word entrepreneurship. So study interesting subjects and pursue exciting careers and develop new skills. These are the points. Here in Brazil, I didn't want to go too far into details here, but I would like to emphasize the role of a very important notice, that is the MyDai paper. This is a report that is very competitive with CNPq, actually, and it is very important in order to produce this report that companies co-finance the fellowships for science and research and for postgraduate work. And it's very interesting that we have a specific theme, of course, but the emphasis is on innovation. So innovation is something that is an object in the specific programs. It's the objective in specific programs in postgraduate programs. And we have in the FEA in the University of São Paulo professional master's degrees in entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is actually an object of post-graduation. So the third topic is assessing innovation and entrepreneurship in graduate studies in Brazil from 2011 to 2020. Professor Edgar has already given us a very detailed exposition on this, but I would like just to call your attention to this evolution. The first milestone that was very important was the CAPES in 1952, though there were some previous courses, and the turning point in the 60s with legal measures. Anyway, several other measures in the field, so to say, and currently we have around 7,000 graduate programs. GeoCaps indicates this distribution between masters, professional masters, doctorates, and professional doctorates in the period from 2011 to 2019. You don't have all information, but up to 2020, but in the period covered for recent postgraduate, recently ended, finished, except for last year that it's not very had very specific issues. So we have here, we have a growth that we can notice here, 47%, and these informations are, Caps has supplies for a wealth of data, and Professor Edgar has already shown us the distribution in the country, most concentrated in the southeastern region, which is obviously also the region with greater population. So we should normalize these evaluations considering the existent population. But one of the concerns in at CAPES and the postgraduate national plan, apart from just the evaluation, is its distribution of the evaluation of this, but also its distribution in the country. The effects have already been commented upon by Professor Edgar. An increase in the last 20 years, an expressive increase in articles published, reducing which led us to a rise in the ranking and the number of absolute number of papers. So we rise in the ranking up to the 13th place. And the last data is also showed by Professor Edgar an impact that grew from 0.73 to 0.86, still below 1, but still a favorable direction. The axis of this national plan, national postgraduate plan from 2011 to 2020 were these 5: the expansion of the system, a creation of a national agenda for research, flexibilization of assessment, the interdisciplinarity, and here I will open a parenthesis. CAPES had at a certain time before starting this period was in a situation in which proposals for postgraduate were refused because they didn't fit in any of the groups of the areas existent at the time. This was submitted to an ad hoc evaluation mainly by COPE in Rio de Janeiro, and it was considered that this program was not being contemplated simply because it wasn't strictly didn't strictly fit into the areas existent areas at the time. For example, I will give an example: the history of physics. So, understanding that many jewels were being lost here, there should be an effort to create this multidisciplinary area, which, for its part, I am part of a group that is studying this now, and at a certain point, there was an expansion, a great expansion of the number of multidisciplinary programs, and this is a theme that will also be object of appreciation. And something that I also think is essential is support in other levels of education, also in basic education, not only in graduate and undergraduate courses, but also in basic education. So this is something that is a whole other discussion, a whole other issue to discuss. These are other areas of CAPES. So let's go ahead. So
in Chapter 9, Human Resources for Companies, the Role of Graduate Studies. we made an appreciation, an evaluation on the barriers to university company connections, well known to most of us who are participating in this event, the central role of innovation for social and economic development, the centrality of this role, and one also believes that it is essential that there be the absorption of high-level scientists and engineers by companies. And there's a list here of conclusions. The following, I have abbreviated them, and they're all in Portuguese just to make my life easier. Elaborate strategies to improve the quality of teaching in all levels, creating new forms of insertion into the labor market, encourage and promote the absorption of masters and PhDs by companies, strengthen the role of IES, public IESs in training of teachers, expanding the Brazilian postgraduate courses with emphasis in technology and engineering, encourage postgraduate courses with an agenda that may train talents and support initiatives in this field. In this evaluation or assessment that we're still carrying out, many things were noted and observed regarding Chapter 9, more specifically. Human resources for companies, innovation, generally speaking. First of all, the emergence of entrepreneurial mobilization for innovation, MEI, that is composed by major companies, the creation of social organization EMBRAPI, inspired by the Fraunhofer, German Fraunhofer, the so-called improved legal framework for innovation in Brazil, the publication of a national strategy for technological innovation, and more recently, last year, a discussion that led to the new national innovation policy. The fact is that with all this good news, if we analyze the metrics that we see around the world, we are still ranked 60 among 135 nations that are assessed regarding innovation according to by the Global Innovation Index, and there is no doubt that this really generates a lot of concern to us. We have a special commission to follow up the National Program for Post-Graduation Courses 2011-2020, and there are subgroups. The human resources for companies subgroup, I work with Carlos Eduardo Pereira and myself, and that is maybe why Professors Marisa and Branca invited me, in addition to our friendship. We are trying to perform quantitative as well as qualitative aspects. We have the benefit of a small team from CAPS that perform prospecting studies and in other institutions, CGE. This graph here was produced by this group and other important publications investigating and researching the destination of graduates, master's degrees and PhDs. And lastly, a proposal to improve the evaluation of graduate studies in Brazil. This commission that I mentioned was not created in the end of the decade. It has followed it's a follow-up commission of post-graduation or graduate course studies in Brazil, and produced reports, different directors. More recently, the federal government decided that there can't be more than X number of people, but more particularly, Professor Jorge Aldi leads us, and this generated a document, this additional request that was presented in the middle of this period to copies by the Technical Scientific Committee, how we could improve graduate studies in Brazil. This commission followed up Professor Helena Naber, who at the time was a member of the commission, in addition to other Professor Sônia Balker. They tried to find the best practices, and Professor Edgar has already mentioned that the main proposal in this document, yes, in this document, the most important proposal is the idea of moving from one single grade or mark note, and you can see this in FAPESP journal. The 5 dimensions have already been presented. I'd just like to draw your attention to the third, is innovation and knowledge transfer. Not only technology transfer, but rather knowledge transfer. We have to also see graduate courses in areas, not only technological areas, social sciences, for instance, communication, in short, humanities. Just to give you an example, that's why we preferred this broader term, knowledge. It's one type, but technology is one kind of knowledge, but it's not the only one. So CAPES requested this commission to present a study on what has happened in the past decade, and with many meetings with outside entities and the directors of CAPES itself. The number of meetings was huge and very interesting meetings. And so we have this document, 25 to 30 pages, very concise document. And the proposals are, where the proposals are consolidated or reconciled, and they have already been presented to the directors of CAPES, and as expected in academic world, this generated certain noise, but everything has been clarified in a series of meetings with the Forum of Post or Research and Graduate Studies. The former president of FOPROP, Dr. Márcio Silva, participates in our group. In short, and also for each one of these 5 dimensions, as Professor Edgar has already touched on, a search to combine indicators that will point to us to the quantity and quality. So they are quantitative, but they're also qualitative indicators. There has to be a story, an explanation, consistency. In short, not only numbers, but there have to be letters and words and articulating numbers, figures, and words. And I was very happy with Professor Edgar's expression when his lecture, when he expressed even better than I the expectation that our commission sees how this can be materialized. I have 2 additional comments why this transition should take place. First of all, to respect diversity the diversity of institutions of higher education in Brazil, the regions where they are located, their age. And so the idea is not to have one single rule or ruler or marking, but rather a diversity of possibilities according to the different aspects. And a second motivation, underlying motivation, is that this should be used as a management tool, not only as a competition one or for awards or happiness or sadness, but it should be an element that may favor us in our studies of comparison. And so we have high expectations with regard to this relevant step that was given. And once again, this is a proposal. Decisions are up to CAP's governance. This is Professor Jorge in the middle, and very dear Professor Adalberto Graça Carvalho, a government worker, exemplary worker at CAPS, who helps us and gives us our support, handing over this report precisely 1 year ago, in February 2020, to the recent, at the time, recently president of CAPES. Professor Anderson used to be the president, and he is today president of ITA. So on top, if you did not have the opportunity to read, this is the report. The report is, you can access it there. I'd like to thank your attention. I have already been introduced. I don't have to introduce. And should there be any questions, Evelyn should give me the simple questions and give the complicated, tough ones to Professor Edgar. Okay, I'll do that. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank not only the outstanding speakers, but also the events organization for the possibility of allowing me to be here talking with two outstanding professionals that have enormous knowledge in this assessment. So as a pro-rector for graduate studies in the University in Rio de Janeiro, it's very important. I would like to, just in order to try to kick off a conversation, because our time is almost up, I note as evaluation process as being something very positive and fundamental, so that we can acknowledge ourselves and give future steps, move forward. So we have to see what we do in a positive light. I'd just like to ask an overarching question that either one can answer. In your view, you've practically conceived the plan and you work with it. Could you give us very briefly your own experience, this new model, whether this new model will be able to show and illustrate a process of maturing in this field? We have seen information about ranking, the ranking processes that you presented. We did not have so far, and let us see how we do in the next decade. But we are at a reasonably interesting level or ranking for countries such as ours. But in this relationship of innovation and entrepreneurship, we're still far from the target. But this is what I tell our peers, my peers. The two arms of the scale have to communicate with each other. And in Brazil, traditionally, please correct me if I'm wrong, there is a very bad tradition of this entrepreneurial support. So the more important arm has to be funding and bringing a support so that this entrepreneurship can, in fact, happen in this relationship of knowledge production at the universities and the work in companies. And so how does this model, in your opinion, when we will be able to see a more mature reaction or growth? And you refer to, in the area of humanities, the training of people that can be trained in this area to deal with the adversities, but how can we work with this if the Ministry of Science and Technology presents as strategic areas that actually divide and move away from social sciences? But in my understanding, I believe that it was far from what we would have liked to see. This was still very marginal. So this is more or less the two questions, and I'd like to thank both of you for your outstanding presentations. Very interesting. Okay, you can begin, either one, whichever one feels like answering first. Edgar, please, go ahead. I would like to make an observation. I'd like to reporting the perception I have of the 49 areas, of which 1/3 is in the field of humanities. All of these areas embrace these ideas, the proposals or proposed by the document of this committee, and we studied all the 49 areas and we tried to implement it the best way possible. I believe that with the initiatives of promoting evaluations according to these guidelines that emphasize the need to transfer knowledge to society and establish this bridge, so the perception that each areas of humanities and more theoretical areas, with this assessment that privileges information that may point toward this bridge, I think that this will also allow society to perceive these bridges, and then the government will reply to this.
We are going through a moment of transformation, and how to, in communicating science to society, and how to communicate the science to the community. It's a reality that we are all facing. If not, so I see that if not in 2 or 3 years, but at some time, the direction is established, and and it is a good direction. I completely agree with Professor Edgar, and I would like to take the opportunity to greet Untitled, because you are there are very few universities that have innovation as you have in your institution, this view of the future that Untitled has. If there's anyone who can talk about receptivity in the community, that is Professor Edgar, because he is leading one of the efforts, and he is listening to what all the leaderships in the several areas are talking about. So I think he has answered in a very satisfactory way, more than satisfactory way, and he's reporting on this. Actually, it's a bet that is being made. So this is a bet in the direction that I also believe is correct. I also like to take the opportunity to answer Professor Evelyn. There are two questions, actually. One is about the situation of the two arms, to the two sides of the seesaw here. And in these two sides of this, we have still a lot to work on, but there is quite a large, an expressive number of partnerships between the academic and government and business sectors. So maybe we are not, we haven't actually achieved full speed, but we are evolving, and we are in an intermediate stage, I'd say. But I think it happens. Well, two things are happening actually. What really happens in the perception that we have, is that it's a long story, but Brazil is in a very delicate moment for universities and businesses, and the relationship between them suffers because of this. It's not a trivial. It's not trivial what is happening right now. I'm not going into the details because everyone knows here what we are witnessing. But this does not mean that we have to step back. We just have to, but we do have to rethink things. And one of the things I try to demonstrate is that this classic relationship between university and company is changing. And nowadays, this is changing in a great measure, not only in Brazil, but in Israel and States and so forth, and in Finland, for example, in Spain, and Singapore, and China. We have new actors entering. We have new, actually new agents, new actors. We have much more complexities. In the morning, I was participating in a meeting in another place, in another entity, and I met Casineri, a person who I haven't met him for a long time. He was for a long time director of Braskem, of innovation in Braskem, and it's a company with which we work a lot. He was director of innovation and responsible for the green Clássico Verde. I don't know if you remember when this was launched, and he remarked when we were talking about how to communicate with large companies, he said that in the world nowadays, the main innovation centers are not the big companies. So from the point of view of the entrepreneurial university, we have to think this in another way. It's not also the old model of having a technology transfer office that will calculate royalties and so on. This still is important, but it's much more sophisticated now. And the ecosystem is a lot more complex and richer, and we have to adjust ourselves in the universities. And as for social studies, sciences, I think that this has to do with the vision of offer and demand and offer, of need, to be more generic. That means that we organize ourselves according to offer in specialty areas. some people call as mode 1, Gibbons calls this mode 1 of production of knowledge. Another co-author is Simon Schwarzman from Brazil, Simon Schwarzman. So one is going through each discipline. Each discipline has its hierarchy, its protocol, its career, and so forth. And he says, well, research is done and very well done through mode 1, but there is mode 2, starting from challenges. We have hierarchical groups and not hierarchical groups according to the competencies necessary to solve more complex challenges, and these groups are flexible, not permanent, and so on and so on. This is a long discussion that I won't produce here, but my impression is that traditionally we organize ourselves around mode 1 production, and maybe we need to look at the mode 2. And the idea of interdisciplinarity of this interdisciplinary areas follows this pathway, I believe. And personally, I think there's no sense in separating. If I see, for example, a postgraduate program, let's just choose one randomly, but let's say vaccination, protection of the population through vaccines, vaccination. This people may say, "Oh, is this an issue for medicine, for health, or for biology?" And public health and logistics. So we're not involved these. Of course, they also involved. It's not just the development of new vaccines, but also how will the population be adequately vaccinated. So this is mode 2 production. In this case, especially vaccine, the public imagination, the imagination, the literature, history, everyone is involved. So there must have some way must be a way to manage this group. But if I really want to meet this challenge, solve this, I was going to make a comparison, but it's better not to go there. But that's it. The separation is artificial and doesn't help. I am from an interdisciplinary program that works with social memory, and I can tell you that how hard it is, this dialogue between peers. It's to know and understand everything that is involved, methodological, theoretical knowledge, and this is eminently interdisciplinary program. But we have already overstepped our time limit, but there is a question by Marcos Lins that I would still like to bring up, that what is lacking so that the triple helix program can actually help universities. And I would like to ask you to be very objective in your, very straightforward in your answer. Well, thank you for the question. I think there are three things I can bring into the discussion. First, the research university, especially the public research university here, we have some homework to do. One is homework we must do is in the assessments we conduct in the university for careers and promotion, etc., etc. We have models that we might say have not yet incorporated in the selection and assessment committees this idea. And obviously, a second aspect is how do we, as an entity that is subject to legal administration, how can we stimulate companies to work with universities, but how can we also stimulate the research groups inside universities to face a challenge that they don't really want to face. So first, internal homework. Second, understand that it's not only the university also depends. It's not only the university. We need an ecosystem that understands the need for knowledge. So the cultivation of entities such as the media, governments, regional governments, we have to create a context in which the university is perceived as a contributing institution and not just that ivory tower idea. That is two. And in third place, I will allow myself to conclude, is to bet on our youth. The richest part on any institution are the youngsters, are the students. So we have to bet on them. We have to put our faith in them. So I think if we put our faith in the new generation, this is the best way to add impulse, to incentive the triple helix. Thank you, Professor. Unfortunately, we have to close, so I'll ask Professor Edgar to present his final considerations. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to participate in this panel. For me, this has been important. I have learned a lot. He and Professor Plonski's words have been a great, have been really great to hear him speak, and this really prompts me to go ahead, forge ahead, and congratulations, Marisa. I also would like to greet Max Delita, who has helped so much organize this event. Thank you so much. Professor Plonski, your final words, please. Just thank you. I've already talked too much. Well, I think just to me falls only to agree again the speakers for the excellent contributions you brought to this event, to thank the organization, to thank the translators who have worked intensively, have been working intensively in this event, and to thank the organizers for the opportunity to be here participating in this dialogue. Thank you so much, and Unirio is always open for further dialogues. And thank you for all of you, the whole audience that has appeared. Thank you, thank you.